people laughing because we haven't said anything yet.
Physical comedy!
Oh. Well, I guess I just hadn't noticed any of that yet either, but it is Sunday, halfway through the day, right? So, okay. Welcome, yet again, to the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track. We appreciate you being here. And as usual, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many people have been attending some of our other programming at the con this year? Wonderful, thank you. And I'm sure that the people on this panel have a lot to do for that reason, and we thank you for coming. It has been fun. So what we're going to do today is I have several questions for our panel here. And who's laughing now? You guys are laughing. You got to watch out for those two at the end right there.
Just ignore the giggling and forge on. That's the trick.
Really, I have to learn these things. In any case, and at the end we will have time for a few questions from the audience. And what we will do at that time, just so I don't have to kind of interrupt then, is that we will line people up back against the back wall. You want to raise your hand? Okay. Leah's going to be over there, and you will line up over there for questions, and you'll get to come forward a little bit in order to ask them. But that's what we'll do, and I'll tell you when it's my last question, so you'll know that it's time to go line up, okay? And in the meantime, we're going to have each of our panelists briefly introduce themselves, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Butcher. I'm the author of the Dresden Files.
Hi, I'm Laurell K. Hamilton. Guess I should add the whole creator and writer of Anita Blake and Mary Gentry.
I'm John Hartness. I am the author of the Black Knight Chronicles and the creator of Bubba the Monster Hunter.
I'm Linda Robertson, and I write the Persephone Alchemy series.
I'm Christopher Golden, and I write in multiple genres. My latest novel is Snowblind, and I write the comic book series Baltimore with Mike Mignola.
Hi, I'm Kat Richardson. I write the Greywalker paranormal detective novels.
My first question is, could you just tell us what particular supernatural creatures, beings, however you want to describe them, that you use in your work? That it's something that we may find in your work.
Anything I can possibly get away with or shoehorn in. If it hasn't been there yet, it's because I'm still working my way around to it. So.
If it's not there yet, it will be soon. Okay, there we go.
Hang on. For Anita Blake, anything that goes bump in the night was my original intention. And at this point, it's anything that I don't think will break the spine of the world as far as reality goes. Anything that I think that people would go, I don't believe that. For instance, I would love to do an Anita Blake Santa Claus story. Think how fun that would be to have her sarcastic voice talk about Santa and Christmas. It'd be so awesome. But it would break the back of the world. There's no way. None of us. You just can't put something like that in with Anita. It just doesn't work. But short of things like that, almost anything like you're still giggling. You're right. They're very giggling.
I think some of these people have been to the bar already. Seriously, they were laughing at nothing like 5 minutes ago.
So short of that, almost anything is game. Anything that won't break the world, and biologically speaking, I'd love to use centaurs, but they make no sense to me. Other than that, everything's game.
I'm not going to try to get the list because,
Give us 5 or something.
all right, let's just go with the most obscure crap because I've hit all of the major ones. Plus, boggarts are in the new Black Knight Chronicles. We've done dragons, fairies. I did a Rakshasa story for Bubba. I did a Chupacabra story for Bubba, and I dedicated an entire short story to the running joke of the size of Bigfoot's junk. And I did 10,000 words on how to get a 3-foot tall talking lizard laid. Follow that.
Bastard.
And my biology degree is really hitting the whole lizard thing far, far too seriously.
I found another 3-foot tall lizard.
Now, see, that makes now, yeah. Did it talk?
No.
Then is that bestiality and illegal?
No. 3-foot tall lizard.
Is it an intelligent lizard?
Yes.
Are you sure?
I wrote it.
Well, all right, I had to ask.
Why is it mute?
Because with the one I already created, you can't get a word in edgewise. So it may not be really mute.
So it's the gay Jay and Silent Bob lizard story.
That's your sexual life mates.
Snoochie boochies, motherfuckers.
Linda,
Here we are again.
back to you, Linda.
Witches, werewolves, vampires, dragons, griffins, unicorns, and phoenix so far.
First of all, show of hands for those who would like to read Anita Blake, Elf Hunter. That's what I figured. Me too. I really want to read that story now. Yes. Peer pressure. Peer pressure.
Peer pressure didn't mean anything to me when I was 14. Now, I really don't think you got a shot at it.
All right.
I have been trying to do an Anita Christmas story for decades.
Krampus.
I have, no, I thought about it, and then Grimm got there first. Which wasn't that cool? I love Grimm.
And Krampus is a thing now. Everybody's doing Krampus. You know.
Everybody's been doing vampires for 30 years.
A little longer than that.
But everybody's been doing them.
Look, over the years I have done pretty much every monster folklore thing I could possibly think of, except leprechauns. I actually have done sort of variations on Santa Claus as well, but I still want to read that. Like Elf Hunter. But I think the weirdest one. I mean, I've had dimensional hopping hobgoblins and a character who's actually the clay of God, and basically everything I could possibly think of. But the weirdest one that comes to mind is from the novel I did with Mike Neal, the Baltimore novel that launched the comic book series. And there's a whole big section of the book dedicated to South American legend called El Cuero. And basically El Cuero is a demon that lives in a lake, but the demon actually is that. And the demon has actually, somebody was sort of tanning donkey hide by the lake, and it went into the lake, and the donkey hide basically becomes a demon. And it's just a big piece of donkey hide with teeth around the edges and eyes inside of that, and if you come too close to the water, it grabs you and drags you under. And that sounds like it should absolutely never work, but you'll have to read the book to figure out if I made it not stupid.
Say it's not asinine.
Oh.
Do share the pun.
No.
No, it was very bad. In fact, it was a 2-star groaner pun, as you can tell from all the people who did hear it all groaned. Wow, I seem to have pulled out all kinds of strange creatures, mostly because I like to look under rocks. Let me see, there was a Sissy Yoodle, which is a 2-headed, 3-faced tribal monster from the Pacific Northwest. Golems of 2 different kinds, 4 different kinds of zombies, liches, American Indian ogres, a lay weaver, which is something I invented. It's someone who pulls strands of magic together just because they look pretty and doesn't care what happens. Lots of vampires, witches, necromancers, animated books. There was a werewolf someplace. There was Santa Claus. and his sidekick, Black Peter, who was one of my personal favorites. Right at the moment, we've got animated eyeballs. It's a medical condition, yes. You only get it after Christmas.
Sorry.
I don't know, there's probably others. Those are the ones I remember.
That's quite a list. You have quite a variety here to choose from, which was the whole point of this. What are the challenges of merging the worlds and mythologies of different creatures into one novel, to keeping everything so that it kind of flows and doesn't feel as though it's separate stories within? How can you do that? This is something that I'm personally interested in, which is why I'm asking you.
Are we going in line?
Would you like to answer first, or would you prefer to wait?
I think the biggest challenge is I mean, for me personally, is trying to use language that is evocative that and unique to the creature. If you describe the fight exactly the same way every time, then you're just sort of describing a safari. And the buffalo charged us and we shot it, and the whatever came and you shot it. You got to come up with a different language and a different environment in order to keep that challenging. So by the time you've written, like right now I'm writing like my third or fourth giant bug scene that I've done in the steampunk series, and I've got the challenges coming up with, well, how do I make these things behave, and how do I speak about these things in a way that makes them unique and special and not just like the other giant bugs we've run into elsewhere.
I think, though, that's the challenge of writing a series in general. You describe every time as best you can, to the best of your ability, you describe this building, that person, that interaction. And if it's a series and these are serious characters, you're going to see them again, you're going to walk into that building again, and the true challenge is to describe it enough for new readers that come in. I still have people coming in with the new book. I mean, I'm over 20 books into Anita, and I have 9 in Mary, and people are still picking up the last book and then going back. So you have to describe enough for new people and not over-describe so that the other people that have been reading all the books feel like they've been there, done that, seen this before. It is really difficult. It's not just with each monster you bring on. Yes, you've had a fight like that. It has to be different, unique, special, but you're still fighting. I don't do giant bugs, actually. I can't figure out the oxygen. It's stupid. But my biology degree is really, really good, and every once in a while it loses me some of the really cool stuff that would be really, really fun. Anita could so do giant bugs, if I could just figure out how to do that part.
So giant bugs are okay, but no Santa.
Well, giant bugs are just another type of monster. You can have, if I could figure out the biology of how something that large could exist in our oxygen level now, then I would be totally cool with it, because they did exist bigger than they are now, just not as big as most movies put them out. So it's just going up just a little bit. Santa Claus, on the other hand, because what would it be? You'd have to be on the naughty or nice list. And I think that would be really complicated for adults.
Wait. Complicated for adults? You're talking to an audience of people who believe in Time Lords.
But they don't put their stocking out once a year for the doctor to come down and help them fill it.
Some of them do.
I didn't say they didn't put their stockings out and wish he would come and fill it. I just said that they don't do it.
Ever since David Tennant, there's plenty of stockings hanging out.
Those aren't stockings.
I was going to say, probably like the stockings. But with the vampires and werewolves and anything that's come on stage before, you do. It's a real challenge to make sure that you don't leave the reader feeling like they read this fight scene, they read this mystery before, to keep it unique and yet have the touchstones. I think actually is one of the biggest challenges of series writing.
For me, because I tend to write slightly towards the comic side. It's finding the points of contrast and the points of similarity. When I played around with the Rakshasa, I was like, okay, Rakshasa are cool. Well, Bubba's a big old redneck. Bubba can't figure out the plural of Rakshasa. So I got 3 paragraphs out of it. Is it Rakshasai? Rakshasoi? Rakshasoi sauce? And then, you have the Rakshasa being a shapeshifter, so you have him turn human and put him in an LSU ball cap, because go Tigers. So I'm looking for the points of relatability to punch up the alien nature and use that either for dramatic or comedic impact. So that's one of the things I really focus on when I'm picking and when I'm describing and incorporating monsters into my world, is how are they alike or how are they spectacularly different from my main protagonists. And sometimes that's a Rakshasa and a Go Tigers ball cap, and sometimes it's Bigfoot's Yang. I'm going to keep leaving. I'm going to transition to you every time on Bigfoot's junk.
Yes.
I'm Irish.
He's wearing a kilt, I'm just saying.
I chose to sit here. I know. I'm questioning. Hold on. I know. I wanted to not be on the end, and we'll see. We see where that got me. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what the question was anymore. I mean, I know what I want to say, but I'm not sure that I'm on the exact.
Chris, we have won the panel.
Just about the challenges there to merging the different mythologies of the different creatures into one particular narrative.
Just because my character's never seen this thing before, there's a history to this thing. And sometimes finding out that history is part of learning what to do with it or how to deal with it. In the 3rd book, they fought the fairies on the shores of Lake Erie. And the fairies, many thousand years ago, took the dragons and the unicorns and the griffins and the phoenix from our world. That's why we kind of have them, but we don't actually have them. And they came back with them to fight, using them to fight, and had these collars on them to control them. And when the fairies lost, these things were left behind. So Persephone's got this menagerie of creatures suddenly, and had to have some people come and build a barn really fast at her farmhouse and stuff. But she's got all these creatures, and they don't know what they eat. They don't know what to do with them. And having them have a history that she doesn't know about is what enabled the story to include them and blend that together. So.
And I want to also add that Linda gets points for including part of the name of the panel title in her words right there.
I would buy you a drink for that.
That's right. 10 points for now. And for me, honestly, this all seems very natural. And look, we live in a world where people speak hundreds of languages. Everybody has their own individual folklore. Sometimes down to not just a regional, but a very tiny location, tribal location. And so all of these things that don't and never did exist, people believed existed, all in a shared world. So the idea that there should be in our fiction some separation between the existence of these mythological things doesn't make any sense to me at all. There's no reason why, for instance, Anita Blake and Santa Claus can't exist in the same world.
You're just gonna keep harping on that.
Anyway, but no, seriously, I love taking all of these sort of very disparate legends and bits of folklore and jamming them into the same story and having them run into each other. And again, but it seems very natural to me that we live in this world. I mean, the real world is just as weird and diverse, so why shouldn't the fictional one be?
Yeah, that's where my series kind of gets a bye because I built in a world set where it's the pressure of belief that causes a monster to arise. If there's enough people in an area who believe in something, or there are people who are powerful enough to draw it forth, it comes forth. So where we had a whole bunch of Chinese mages, we had Chinese demons. And where I had a lot of American tribal groups, we had American tribal monsters. So a lot of what you can integrate and how you can integrate it depends on the context of your series. Obviously, there are some things that aren't going to work for Anita because her context simply does not allow them to exist in that world. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice.
I was having trouble.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I did spend all night in the bar with John. Therefore, I now have no voice left because I've been yelling and laughing at John all night.
This happens to me a lot.
It was Bigfoot's fault.
It's always Bigfoot's fault. Oh my. It's okay to be TK.
I chose to sit here. What kind of idiot am I?
I told Kat this was her NPR voice, by the way.
Call it my sexy stewardess voice.
Delicious dish. Yeah. How about delicious dish? Anybody remember that?
Please keep your hands and arms inside the panel until the panel has come to a full end.
You know, my GPS sounded like that.
I'll be in the bar later.
I'm not even.
It's the comedy hour up here. What can I say?
No, that's at 10.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, that's right. It is.
Yeah, no, really, that's right here. It's on.
It is, yes. Yes, I know when it is. All right. What? Yeah, yes, you do too. What types of supernatural beings do you see as being kind of most useful for you as being reflections of contemporary culture in some way, and how and why? Anybody who wants to go ahead. Have to go. Cat. I know that was not a funny question, so I'm not quite sure. She's just practicing for the 10 o'clock panel tonight.
Right now, my favorite monster is Chris Golden.
You know why? Bigfoot's John. Sorry. Carol. Okay, so go ahead, Carol.
Well, I was trying to make it a somewhat, serious question, but that's okay.
Please do.
Does anybody want to try to answer it, or do I just need to say it again?
Please repeat the question.
Oh, please repeat it. Okay. Because some of you down there were laughing too much at Cat falling off the end of the
We broke
horizon.
Cat Richardson.
You're like the unruly kids at the back of the class.
That is
We're up
right.
here trying to take this seriously. And you people... Wow, that hurts, sir.
Right now, Jim Butcher's like, if I have to stop this panel.
Jim, I have only one thing to say.
Don't make me come back there. I got gouged out for this.
Ladies and gentlemen, your voice of reason, Jim.
Please restate the question.
And of all the things to be called at DragonCon, okay, who's the nerd on me?
That actually says more about them.
This is true. No, my question was, what types of supernatural beings do you see as being the most reflective of maybe contemporary culture, so that when you incorporate them, they can be used that way?
Vampires.
Okay.
Vampires. The answer is vampires.
Now, my star pupil here on my left answered the question question. Thank you, Jeff.
And the reason that I know that that's the answer to the question is because that's what keeps getting used over and over and over again. Vampires have been over since the early 90s because that's what I was getting told when I was getting ready to break it. Oh no, vampires are over. And yet we keep getting new series, we keep getting new books, we keep getting new movies. So I think by sheer omnipresence, I think that's a really strong answer for how do you tell a good story.
And I can't argue that. And I was told in the late 80s, 1980s, when I was sitting around Guilty Pleasures, one editor literally rejected the book by saying the vampire genre is dead. Vampires are dead. And I remember thinking to myself, do you not understand that vampires don't stay dead? But you can't write back to the editors that reject you. You just let it go and move on to the next person who will be smarter.
And send them copies of the New York Times when the list comes out.
Yes. I did have the petty pleasure of an editor rejected the book because the market could not stand one more vampire book. But wait, it gets better because they actually wrote in the letter. They actually told my agent that because another vampire book came out that week, that's why they rejected it. Because the market was flooded at that time. And I had the petty pleasure of having one of the editors that had done that when I had 5 books out and was hitting the lists and everything. In an elevator at one of the conventions, says, "Oh, your latest book is great. I wish we'd had a shot at Anita when you were seeing her around." I said, "Well, you did, dear." And she says, "Really?" And I says, "Yes." And I quoted her back her rejection slip. It was a petty moment, I admit it, but it was fun.
Yeah, you get +10 for Gryffindor or whatever.
My family and nearest and dearest actually chose my house for me, and I argued with them, but they put me in Slytherin. I wondered why too. And they said I was brave enough to be Gryffindor, smart enough to be Ravenclaw, and hardworking enough.
50 points for Slytherin.
You damn betcha. But it was my ruthlessness.
You know, I agree with the vampire. I agree with vampires as the most useful reflection of contemporary society because they fake being part of it so well. So by taking the societies that we live in and tweaking them just 10 or 12 degrees off axis and making that be vampire society, we can shine a light on the things we either really enjoy or really despise about the societies that we live in because they are so visibly close to us. If you're dealing with a dragon, they're so far outside the human experience that they are more difficult to relate to, but because vampires, depending on your methods, used to be human or have spent time living as humans and now have developed their own societies, that's one reason they've become a very useful mirror to hold up to nature, as it were. Bigfoot's junk. Your turn.
You know, Santa Claus is not as tawdry as the dong of Squatch.
I did not say Santa Claus is tawdry. Do not go on the internet and say I insulted Santa Claus. I did not. That is not what I said.
No. I'm just saying he's teasing you about Santa Claus, and that is not as tawdry of being teased as the Squatch dong.
He's a very noble Bigfoot.
I think she's saying that she's being harassed even worse than you are.
I wrote it.
I would rather be teased about Santa Claus, is what I'm saying.
Okay, Santa Claus is junk.
Isn't that what's in the bag?
He fears not your microphone.
Do you have an answer to this question?
I'm not sure anymore.
Roll 34!
I'm gonna tweak it a little, just because you guys have all touched the vampires. I'm just gonna say my werewolves, being strong, super strong, are pretty much blue collar folk is what I try to show with them. And Johnny made a little joke to her once that if the Rege in Romania put out the call for all of the werewolves to assemble, that the airlines would never be able to handle the exodus of people from the States. And she goes, well, he couldn't do that. The moving industry in America would crumble because they're all movers. So that would be, I guess, how I'm portraying the everyday Joe. Supernatural creatures.
You know, I feel like the vampire thing, I agree with everything that has been said about the vampires in the panel, but I would actually say that certainly I know everyone's saying zombies are dead. You know, editors are saying that now too. But I feel like we live in a culture that has become, and to get really serious for a minute, we as a society become more and more unwilling to look at the things that are disturbing. And we become so good at ignoring the things that are unsettling, and even to the point where we pretend on a really high level that death is non-existent. I think that the zombie sort of craze in pop culture came about not just because of the success of a handful of movies. And I'm talking about, you know, prior to the Walking Dead TV series even. I feel like it's been our way to examine the things that really we don't normally look at. You know, we had going on for a long time these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but unlike historically, you know, we saw no coffins coming home. The coverage wasn't there. We had U.S. soldiers torturing people at Abu Ghraib and all of these things happening, and school shootings and everything that's horrible. And you see this stuff on the media, but it's not something typically that people spend a lot of time talking about. It's not something that we spend a lot of time objecting to. It's not something that we spend a lot of time examining. And so I really feel like more than ever, with that particular monster, we were examining death. We were examining the real horrors that we're dealing with. And so I really feel like the zombie craze came about in large part as a way for us to kind of have some catharsis and examine our feelings about that stuff. And I do think that zombie stories will continue to be popular the same way editors are going to, saying that vampires are dead. That, those stories will continue to happen, we'll continue to do them, but I think that it was important for us societally to have that. And The Walking Dead is a story that there is no ending to that story. And this is the thing about zombie stories, is there's no third act, ever. And there's no third act to The Walking Dead. They're never going to, get to the promised land. Rick is never going to show up and go, hey, we're safe now. So there's never going to be a wrap-up episode to that series. There can't be,
Just all be dead. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that element of the story is something we never talk about in general. And I think there are a lot of disturbing things about our daily lives, to bring it all down from Bigfoot junk and elf slayers, that I think makes the stories that we're talking about incredibly useful. So that's mine.
Proceeding from that thesis. Vampires, yeah. Okay, I think we've actually moved away from them. They're the thing which is seductive, but which ultimately consumes and destroys us. Then we move on to zombies, the death that will not die, that continues shambling forward. We're in the middle of an economic crisis, social crisis, where things keep falling apart, but they never quite fall apart completely, so you can't rebuild. And certainly that's what's going on in the publishing industry at the moment. The thing that I think exemplifies what we're heading into is the shapeshifter, because we're all going to have to be a lot more creative. We're all going to have to change our skins and become something that we aren't now, and hopefully we're going to enjoy doing it, and if not, well, sorry. And then, of course, you get to my personal favorite, Pokemon.
Can I just say that my 18-year-old son, when he was like 12 years old, 13, even like, or maybe he'd be embarrassed if I said 13, when he was like 11 or 12 years old, he still was convinced that the Pokemon were out there and they were coming, man. Like the alien, they were just gonna land like fucking Triffids.
And you gotta catch them all.
I'm going to be asking my last question, so those of you who have a question for the panel, if you would line up along the back wall as instructed. Leah and Karen will raise their hands, and they're the people you need to see. So my question is, what is a supernatural creature, being, whatever you would like to refer to them as? Which one have you not written about yet that you really would like to sometime? That you either have an idea for, or that you're hoping an idea for comes to you about?
Anybody?
Well, actually, now, if this actually appears in a story, I'm now going, giant bugs would be cool. I haven't done that before, and that would be really cool. I've been looking for something large enough to sit with a particular story that I've had on the sticky note wall forever. And since it's improbable to begin with, the mystery, if it's improbable to begin with, that might mean that I can go as far out there as I can, as long as there's a lecture somewhere in the story where somebody says, this isn't biologically possible. As long as we know that, we can move on.
I kind of want to play with werewolves some more. I've done a little with werewolves, but I have a werewolf character that I want to bring back and dig a little deeper with, and that's a society. There's a society in my head that I want to build for them that I'm interested in playing with.
I actually want to do dragons. You might have noticed I'm wearing one. I was born in the year of the dragon. And I think they're really cool, especially casting my mind back to one of the first kind of urban fantasy things I ever read a long time ago. It wasn't considered urban fantasy then. It was contemporary. R.A. McAvoy's Tea with the Black Dragon, in which the dragon is this quiet little Chinese man who every once in a while becomes a dragon and destroys people. I really enjoyed that. It kind of reminds me of some people I used to work with at Microsoft.
I did a trilogy of novels called The Veil. The first book is called The Myth Hunters. In that trilogy, I've got pretty much every creature from folklore that I ever wanted to use. So I guess I'm retiring now. But to be honest, I love monsters, always have. But I think that the creatures that I enjoy writing most about are us. So.
Those are the scariest. Yeah.
You did mention earlier that you hadn't heard leprechauns yet.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. All right, so the challenge is laid.
Yeah.
Leprechauns, Santa Claus.
Yeah. Fight!
Or anybody?
I still got to do my dragon book.
You got there, okay.
In the Dresden Files, yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. I was going to do it whether they wanted it or not.
And see, I've already touched on dragons. The dragons are extinct in America. It's a throwaway couple of lines in one of the early Anita books.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and so dragons are real in Anita's world, and so are a lot of other things, but they are like real wild animals. Some of them are native, and some of them are not, and some of them are extinct. And so reintroduced.
Dragon Conservation Society.
Yeah,
That works so well with kudzu.
yeah, we're trying to reintroduce. We're trying to reintroduce wolves. Now we're going to be hunting them again. In Scotland, they are going up in arms because people want to reintroduce They wanted to reintroduce wolves, and the Scots are going, hell no. And they're killing badgers. The largest carnivore left in the British Isles being killed. I know. Okay, I know. Bovine tuberculosis. I realize, I get that. But, you know, it's the cows giving it to the badgers. The badgers are just mobile. So, I don't know, maybe we need badger fences. Or, you know, you only have to dig down so many feet. I don't know what the answer is this, but every time we try to reintroduce something, can you imagine dragons? That would be so... I don't know. I've actually got several dragon stories. I keep trying to do dragon stories set in contemporary times, and then I keep thinking about the fallout. I keep thinking literally, how would a modern society deal with it? And they would just be going, if they don't even want a wolf next door, wolf running around after their sheep, would you want something that could fly and breathe fire?
Sidewinder missiles.
What?
You know, you're thinking of all of these real serious things. I'm thinking, how do you clean up the poop?
No, I thought about that too.
Well, not to mention where
Now,
it
do you
comes
burn
from.
dragon poop like you do cat poop? Because that's at least useful.
You know, if you could make fuel out of it, maybe. But I would think it'd be caustic, and I think you'd end up with EPA problems with the fumes.
Maybe it could be like guano. Maybe we could discover that it's useful for something, you know, explosives.
Well, that's true. That's good.
Instant landmine.
I see a whole dragon poop anthology coming up.
It'd be an
I've gone with some kind of mind-altering drug.
for the blood, I would think, not the
Oh,
guano.
That's it.
Not
The
the
theme
guano.
is
Because
dragon.
absolutely everything with the dragon would have to be useful.
Yes. You know what? We really have the beginnings of anthology.
How to eat your dragon.
501 uses for a dragon.
Yeah, to help with how to train it, how to eat it.
The only thing I want to say off on a tangent to this is just because we're talking about dragons, Reign of Fire, man. I love that movie.
It is a horribly flawed movie, but it has one of the best dragons. And I love the moment when they're telling the story of Star Wars.
No, yeah.
Is that
Yeah, it's great.
Yes, of course I made it up.
yes, yes. Luke, I am your father, and all the little kids go. Ah!
Just have a drink.
I just want to write about Squatch Dongs.
There will be a big bad 3.
Hi. Obviously, you guys have a wide spectrum of different kinds of monsters and power levels and whatnot. Everything from werewolves to, in some cases, the like world and universe spanning like fallen angels and actual angels of the Creator. So, how do you sort of manage the power levels that you're dealing with there? And is it something that you come up with ahead of time? Do you plan that out, or does it just kind of fall into place?
I don't plan the power levels. They rise and fall on their own whim. I've written stuff for the magic system that basic system stayed the same, but how it was used and where it went for the abilities, I totally didn't see it coming. So no, I didn't have it planned out.
There has to be balance. So if you have a creature, if you have a monster that's so overpowered that your hero can't possibly win, then you have to find Excalibur. Or a rocket launcher. Well, I mean, any technology that is so sufficiently advanced enough appears to be magic, right? So, yeah, a dragon shows up and it breathes fire and poops LSD or whatever. But a Sidewinder missile still blows its wing off. So, a technology can be used as a way to balance that kind of power. One of the things I really enjoyed when I first read the first Anita Blake book was you don't necessarily have to put a stake in its heart. If you blow a big fist-sized hole in its chest, it probably ain't getting up. So, I shoot for trying to come up with a way to balance power. And, okay, if you're in a fist fight with Bigfoot, well, maybe you're kicking him in the junk.
Wow.
You knew that was coming.
I actually, to follow on, not from the junk thing. I look at it with the whole, for those of us who are comics people, I look at it from the whole perspective of, look, every time Batman and Superman have thrown down, Batman has kicked the shit out of Superman. And rightly so, because Superman's a jackass. Yeah, but that's the point. I mean, Batman is just way smarter than Superman. Superman, is obviously incredibly powerful, but if I want my character to go up against something, that is clearly far, more powerful, the character just has to be more clever, or figure out a way to, or recruit some help. And, but if Superman ever beat Batman, I would cry. I mean, it's just like, anyway.
Yeah, for me, it's just a plot complication. You want to give your characters a challenge. I'm sorry, I'm so quiet. You want to give your characters a challenge, so obviously you want to put them up against something that, at least initially, they think they can't beat, and they're going to have to work not only against the plot, but against themselves, and figure out a way to beat it. And then you hope that you don't overpower your characters to the point where there's no challenge left, because then you have to find some way to either reset their abilities, which I did in mine, or some way to raise their antagonists to where they are once again a challenge. So it kind of depends on what kind of writer you are. Do you want to challenge your character, or do you want to challenge your world? And the context of your world and characters will determine just how you're going to do that.
For me, I kind of planned it out. I figured out, what I was going to be doing at the end, and what I was going to be, pitching Dresden up against at the end of the story, and then it was kind of a lot easier to see. Okay, well, this is how I'm going to need to scale that up, and how he's going to have to. He's weightlifting. He has to work hard enough to hurt his muscles that they grow back stronger, and then and then now he's got the next challenge, which hurts just as much. The hurt just as much thing is important, because if I write a book where Dresden is not floundering desperately, then it's just not going to be any fun.
I love him when he's a flounder.
Oh, sorry. Hi, thank you all so much for coming. We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we really are very grateful. This question is specifically for Laurell, but all of you can comment. I just don't have I've read her a little more than I've read the rest of you. I'd like to know about how, if your family, your immediate family, by that I mean we haven't heard anything about your stepmother, your father, your brother anymore in your later books as we did in your early books. And I didn't know if Anita was planning a trip home like Micah did. And for the rest of you, I don't know how your immediate family is reflected in your books, your characters.
Let me rephrase the question back to you. You're talking about Anita's family that I mentioned in the books. Okay, because
I'm sorry.
Okay, I
family.
just want to be clear that Anita's family is very unlike my own.
I'm sorry, yes, Anita's family, not immediate family, yes.
We are planning to take Anita home. I have a story set where she goes home for Thanksgiving. And originally, that story idea has been under my sticky wall so long, it was Richard who was going home to meet Mom and Dad. And, of course, that's not working out so good. So it was Mike and Nathaniel. And the reason we can't take Jean-Claude home is because her grandmother, Blake, is a crazy, rabid, right-wing Christian, and we are really pretty scared she might open a window at the wrong moment. I mean, she's not, I'm not sure how stable she is. She's not well. And, but why haven't we done it? Because
I just wonder.
It just hasn't been the right time yet. I've got a plot for it. I've even got the beginning of the first chapter for it. But we haven't gone home. And I finally realized that part of the reason is that I don't know what to do with a father. When I took Jason home, his father was dying. You see a little bit in the hospital. Micah goes home, his father's dying. Why? My parents were divorced by the time I was 6 months old. I was raised by my grandmother. My mother died after my mother died when I was 6. There were no men. I was raised in just my grandmother and me. I don't know what a father does. I don't know what good they are. I learned, I mean, seriously, I don't know. I didn't know as a child, and I saw everybody have one, but I didn't know what they did in the household. I was raised to do all the guy stuff. I was raised, if something was heavy, as my grandmother got older, I lifted it. I did all the guy stuff. And we didn't have anybody else. If somebody needed to use a tool, we hired help. You don't want to give me tools and say, go to it. So the reason Anita hasn't gone home, I finally realized, is I don't know what to do there, because her father is the consistent figure. Her mother is the one who died. I don't know how to write that yet. I'm learning by watching my daughter get older and interact with my husband, her father. Well, her biological father is my first husband, but Jonathan is her father, her dad. And watching them interact, a friend's wedding, and how important it was to her to dance with her father at her wedding, and for him to dance with her. That's why he paid for the big shindig. He wanted to dance with his daughter at the wedding, and I didn't understand why. I watched and am learning what fathers do with children and how important they are and what their role is. I'm hoping in a few years I will have seen enough good parenting and good fathering to be able to write the story.
Family interactions in
Well, one of the things, like Jim kind of mentioned, we all love to torture our characters. I love to torture my characters. One of my protagonists were turned into vampires in their early 20s, right out of college. And now they are still living in their hometown, and they're moving to a place where they are watching their parents and their friends age. So they know that they're not going to. So part of their maturation process as characters is watching people around them change as they cannot, or in ways that they cannot. So that's something that we're exploring in the Black Knight Chronicles. In book 3, we bring back one of the protagonists' sister, who he hasn't seen since he was turned. She was an infant. She's now in college, and they run into each other. And she recognizes him from pictures because he still looks the same. So we have to deal with that. So,
That's a long time to not change at all.
well, physically he doesn't. So we have to deal with the fact that he's eminently recognizable to her. She's not at all recognizable to him. And those are things that I'm working through with these characters, is their comprehension of the aging process as a third party.
At what point do you decide you need a new monster, or if you don't do original monsters, when do you decide to put your stamp on it or deviate from the established folklore?
You know, it gets slow, and you're writing, and you're thinking this part's a bit slow. Maybe a new monster, yeah. You know, the old pulp advice: when you're not quite sure what to do next, have someone kick down the door and start shooting. In this case, you know, it's have something kick down the door and start slavering.
One of the whole points of writing for me is to take monsters, traditional monsters, throw them into contemporary society, and shake it all up, see what happens. That's something that's interested me from the beginning and still does. So it's not so much add a new monster, is add a new way for society to interact with the same monster, or for that quote-unquote monster to interact with them. Giving the vampires, you know, they're legal citizens, they have rights, they pay taxes, but they, at that point, didn't have the right to vote. So it was taxation without representation. I believe they have the vote now. We just haven't stated that on screen, which we need to address. So for me, it's finding new ways for them to interact, things that I haven't seen done, and changing the monsters just enough, taking that leap. Like staying real up on real voodoo, taking your magic, your movie zombies, and now Anita in her necromancy has gone out of the context of folklore. She's gone further than folklore, further than anything I can find that's real and contemporary. I can only find it's urban legends, it's movie legends almost, some of her level of power. It's actually not folklore. There are legends of the dead rising. There are no legends that I can find. Let me stress this last part. I can find of people that were able to raise the dead, just one individual. There were people who made deals with Satan. There's Satan and demons and stuff who could raise the dead, but I can find no contemporary of a person who was still living who had magically raised the dead and raised armies of the dead. That seems to be movie and horror fiction. And so, I'm out past where I can actually research, because eventually we all go past our research, because that's what makes it fiction.
I need a new monster every short story, because otherwise it would be Bubba the Werewolf Hunter or Bubba the Vampire Hunter. He needs new things to chase. Some of them I adapt from folklore, some of them I completely tweak from other sources, but to keep a series of comedic horror short stories running, I need to keep it fresh. And since they're shorts, I run out of monsters real fast. And the body count keeps piling up and up and up.
That would be really hard.
There's a website that lists all these monsters from folklore, and it's alphabetical. I'm at about C.
I guess for me, I would say, as I said, I love monsters, I love folklore, and sometimes I just want to write about monsters or creatures from folklore. But for me, I'm actually way more interested in bringing a monster or a supernatural element into the story as a catalyst to set something in motion in the characters' lives. Everybody has something horrible simmering, whether it be tension with people you know, or secrets that you don't want to share, and whether it be, the arrival of monsters or a hurricane, and whatever the catalyst is in the story can draw those things out. So that's interesting to me. So I search for new monsters as new ways to provide that catalyst and to get a story rolling. And also just because, sometimes you want a South American dog monkey with a human hand on the end of its tail, which I actually used in The Veil. So actually a thing out of folklore, or some giant creature with a giant mouth in its belly, and that stuff is really fun. But I try to use them to be engines for a story rather than the story itself.
Yeah, I like to use a new monster for every story, even if there's a lot of the ensemble reappearing, because they represent the new challenge. Also, I strongly believe that we are actually the monsters. So all of those monsters, to a certain degree, represent aspects of us, the things that we love, the things we hate, the things we fear, the things that we secretly don't want anyone to know we would really, really like to have.
My question is, if you could take a protagonist from your stories and throw that protagonist into another author's universe, what would that story look like? Which universe would you pick, and what would that look like?
I would write Anita Blake, Elf Hunter.
I was going to say that's the first time they're all speechless at the same time.
Harry Dresden, Jedi Knight. Waldo Butters.
I've actually got a sketch of that at home. The San Diego Star Wars Society marched in with like a bunch of stormtroopers and gave me an award, a Spirit of Star Wars award. That had there was a sketch of Harry Dresden with a lightsaber. Kind of awesome. It's a nice.
Thank you, everyone. Let's give our cast, our panel guests, hands, please. And thanks very much to you for coming. We appreciate it. Please keep coming to our programming. Thank you.